you were a kid, what did you want to be? Did you want to be a millionaire? An international business executive? A policeman? A famous musician, singer, and songwriter on stage with legends like Elton John, Queen, or Oasis? Or maybe an award-winning bodybuilder, a martial arts expert, or a mixed martial arts competitor? Rob Kelly has been all of these things and lost it all to addiction. But there was a bigger plan for him. He has gone on to recover and give hope and help to thousands. He is the founder of AAA New Creations, Spirit Recovery Group, Life Recovery Planner, and the World Recovery Foundation. He has been called the Tiger Woods of recovery. Please welcome Rob Kelly.
Hi guys, my name's Rob Kelly and I'm a recovered alcoholic and addict. How are we doing today, guys? Good. Excellent. I'm a recovered and alcoholic and addict. Recovered is the word. I'm going to tell you a few things today, guys, that you've probably not heard before. I'm going to say a few things that some of you may agree with, some of you may not agree with. The point is that I was forever recovering when I came into the rooms of a 12-step program, whether it be Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. For many, many years, I was recovering. I kept coming back, and I nearly died. And it's the reason why I'm stood here today. One of the reasons why I do what I do today, one of the reasons why I'm so far away from home today is I'm sick and tired of watching people die of this disease. I'm sick and tired of watching people die through lack of knowledge and understanding about my disease, the terminal illness that I once had. I'm going to take you through my story because I really need to validate who I am and where I come from. I want you guys to know, whoever's here today and watching these tapes at home, that I've been there and done it, and this is the reason why I'm so passionate, and I'm really passionate about this stuff, guys. I really am. I've been doing this for a long time, and I do it for one reason. It's to make sure that people get from A to recovered as soon as possible. It's a short-term deal, guys. It's not a big-term deal. It's not a long period. So I'm going to tell you about my childhood. I'm going to tell you what it was like, what we are like today, and I'm going to tell you what happened in between. You see, when I came into certain rooms, they told me the reason why I was an alcoholic, and I didn't believe that for a second. I just thought I drank too much, but the reason why I was an alcoholic was because of my upbringing. It's because of the child abuse. It was because my parents were unemployed. It's because my dad drank too much. It was because of the Vietnam War. It was because of none of those. The medical fraternity is still baffled today with alcoholism and addiction. How can we treat drug addiction with a drug? We can't do it. So we have to look at the problem, and the problem really is me. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, guys. In the early days, there's certain things about my schooling. My schooling was great, it really was. And there's certain things about that schooling that stick out in my mind, and I don't know whether they're resentments or not, but I'm going to tell you about them because some of you might identify with this silly thing from my past that so many years on, I still remember today. Them silly things were, I was always the last person to be picked for the soccer team. Let me explain how that works. The two captains are chosen by the teachers. They'd be the best at soccer in that year. They would then have the opportunity at a flip of a coin to choose one person from a crowd of people to be on their team. So Johnny would say, I'll go first, I'll have Peter. The next captain would say, I'll have John, I'll have David. Everybody got chose apart from me, and I was the last one to get picked. And this is the response. Oh, I'll have Rob Kelly. Every time it happened. And I had to do the walk of shame. That stuck in my mind, and the reason why it stuck in my mind is because that's how I felt all my life. I always felt as if I didn't fit in anywhere. I always felt as if I wasn't good enough. Even at my height of my business, taking millions of dollars a year, I was still waiting to be found out. Found out for what? The business was doing well. But that's the feeling I had inside. I was a very clever young alcoholic because then I went to study martial arts and karate and judo. And if the captains didn't choose me first, I'd beat them up after. I'd kick the crap out of them later on, wherever it may be. So I threatened people. And at an early age, I realized that if I started bodybuilding, which I did, you heard the announcement, and I started martial arts, that people became scared of me. And it was that first time that I knew that you needed to give me respect because I was insecure. I always thought I wasn't good enough, and all through my life that's happened. My rest of my schools were great. My college days were great. The nice thing about college was I found other people that could drink like me until about midnight, and then they sort of waved off a little bit and they'd go home because they had a test in the morning at 7 a.m. I'd be going home at 6 if I had a test at 7 just to study for an hour to get to the test. So slowly but surely, I'd lose them people. I'd end up drinking on my own. But it was a drinking fraternity. I loved it. It was a drugging fraternity. I just fit straight in. It was wonderful. Some of the best years of my life. I came out of there and through peer pressure, I went into the police force. I was a police officer, nothing to do with my degree. I was a police officer, which amazed me, but it was peer pressure at the time. I joined the police force and my drinking was every day, but it wasn't unmanageable. I could manage it. As long as I stuck to my 1 bottle of vodka a day, I was doing okay. And every couple of months, to prove that I wasn't an alcoholic, I'd go on to cocaine or amphetamines and have a 3-month dry period. So I wasn't an alcoholic, everything's cool, just done 3 months, back off the drugs, treated myself from the 3 months off the alcohol, going back into the alcohol, and that's how crazy it become. I didn't last too long with that job, unfortunately. I got fired from the police force. I remember being taken back to the police station after a siege had happened, and my sergeant saying, "You're fired, you're drunk, you're an alcoholic." And within 15 minutes of the siege ending in central Manchester, back in the United Kingdom, I was walking home with all my bags being packed and I was done. I wasn't too bothered about being fired. He called me an alcoholic. How dare he? Just because I stank of this stuff every day, just because I drank every day, don't call me an alcoholic. I imagine thinking about these alcoholics being dressed in these big raincoats with the string tied around the waist. That was an alcoholic begging, not somebody with a distinguished career. Can't be an alcoholic, surely not. And it brought absolute disgrace on my family. What it brought to me was a period of time with money in my bank account to now properly start drinking. And that's exactly what I did. Over a period, I'm going to run it real quick, there was a period of 10 years that I was mostly in blackout. But during them 10 years, after leaving the police force, I joined a telecoms company many years ago before the big mobile phones, the cell phones came out with the batteries this size. You remember them guys, the really big ones. Before them came out, the infrastructure needed to be built in the towers, and we specialized in the towers. And within a short period of time, my company was turning over millions of dollars a year. Literally went out on my own and started with a couple of $100 in the bank. And before I knew what day it was, we were getting large contracts and it was phenomenal. Them 10 years were a blackout. During them 10 years, I met a girl, thought she was the one for me. She allowed me to drink, that's what it was. Decided that I would marry her, bought a house on the hill, a $3 million house, bought a Porsche, a Rolls Royce and a Bentley, had a chauffeur, and then later on we had 2 wonderful children. And I thought my life was superb. I thought my life was complete. I had arrived. Alcoholic in the police force, firing me. Look at what I've done now. What the wealth did was to mask my alcoholism. The alcoholism was taking me, every inch of me, and turning into this monster that I didn't believe I could turn into. Whenever I drank, I was like a Jekyll and Hyde. It talks about, in the big book, it talks about that. I can identify with that. Every single time the same thing would happen. I've done some horrible things in blackout. You know, somebody once told me, we don't really have a blackout. What we do is we choose to not to remember the worst things in our life. I don't know whether I agree with that or not, but I can be walking down the street today and somebody can do something off to the side of my eye, whatever it may be, smack a child, trip over, choke on a sweet, whatever it may be, and it'll bring a memory back, and it'll be a bad memory. And for about 10 minutes, I'm dealing with that memory that is destroying. It really is. There were terms in that marriage and that relationship, and especially with the children coming on, that I'm not very proud of. There are things to me that I'm embarrassed today. I'm going to share some of them with you today. And the reason why I'm sharing them is the reason why I'm sharing the money I had and the money I lost. It's not my ego. My ego went when they took my children off me. It's to stress that alcoholism and addiction does not discriminate. That alcoholism and addiction, once it gets a grip, will take you down. And you are not the exception to the rule. Because if there was going to be exception, guys, it was going to be me. I couldn't do it. I remember once during my height of my alcoholism, drinking every day, coming downstairs for some reason, downstairs to the kitchen at maybe 2, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, and suddenly putting my bottle of vodka on the side, which held this much in the bottom, but this much was mine. That was just enough to get me to sleep for another 2 hours before I got up for work. It was just enough to put me in that coma that would make me sleep and get some rest. It was my 2 inches of vodka. I put it down the side for a second, and I don't know where my wife come from, but she took it off the side of the counter of the kitchen, and she held it, and she said them words that every alcoholic hates. She said, "I think you've had enough." Let's think about this. In the sane world, this was my 3rd bottle of vodka in about 30 hours. I was due to drive to work in 2 hours' time, and I just drank this bottle. I'd had no sleep. I was stinking of alcohol. I had a staff of 300 to perform some meeting with. Maybe she had a point. So what did this alcoholic do? I took a kitchen knife out and I stabbed her 3 times. And as she lost 6 pints of blood, fell to the floor, nearly died, I took my bottle off her and I finished it off because it was just enough to get me to sleep that night. She spent 3 weeks in intensive care and I spent 3 weeks in a blackout. Not much of a trade, really. You see, I was the alcoholic, guys, that raped and beat his wife. I was the alcoholic that raped and beat your wife. I was out of control, guys, and I couldn't stop. But it didn't hit me. I didn't know that. See, I found nothing wrong with what happened in the kitchen. I found nothing wrong when I fell down the stairs onto my 1-year-old baby and crushed nearly every bone in her body, and she had to go to intensive care that morning. I didn't think there's anything wrong with that. I thought it was an accident. I didn't think there was anything wrong with the stuff I was doing at work, treating people like scum, talking down to every person. After 2 or 3 hours, shaking so badly that I needed another drink. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. Walking round at the back of my house in the yard, the big garden, at 4:30 in the morning, drinking my first bottle of vodka because I had to steady my hands, because I had to drive to work. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. I really didn't. But there obviously was. I used to hide my stuff everywhere. You ladies will identify with this, especially if you're not alcoholic, but you're with somebody that is. Because I used to spend hours and hours and hours in my house hiding my bottles. And within 3 minutes of my wife being in the house, she'd find every single one. And I could never understand that. And there were some crazy places that I'd find to hide this stuff. I used to go to the local library and buy 5 or 10-year-old copies of the local newspaper, then wrap my bottles in the 5-year-old copies of the newspaper, then hide them away. So when she found them, I'd say, "Oh, hang on a second. Look at the date